Hello, thank you for attending this session. My name is Nicole Mieli. I am a PhD student at Lund University in Sweden, and my research is about tourism. So, very small disclaimer here, I am not a philosopher. I do not come from philosophy background. So any kind of constructive criticism is more than welcome. But with that being said, I am really interested in philosophy, and I'm really interested in philosophy of technology and in looking at my field through that lens. So what I'm studying is technologically mediated tourist experiences, and in particular, I focus on the smartphone. Now, I put this picture here not because I'm going to talk about airplanes, but because I want just to put a quick reminder of how important technology is in tourism, how tourists rely on all kinds of technology, both for the infrastructure of tourism and for their practices. And this is transport technology is just one example, but of course, information technology is also very important. And like Don Eide does in his Technology and the Life World, I want to ask, what would tourism be without technology? Is it even possible to imagine, even in an abstract way, like he says, is it possible to imagine a tourist that has no technology at all? And I actually don't think you can, or at least not in the way we understand tourism nowadays, because if you can't travel and if you can't learn about places through various pieces of information, how are you going to be a tourist? So I imagine it would look something like this, but maybe it would not be what we understand as tourism nowadays. So my research uses or relies on this triad of I, technology, world, and the relation in between. And of course, this is a basis of post-phenomenology. And I understand the tourist as the I, the human, the person in this. And for technologies, I focus on the smartphone. And as for the world, I focus on the tourist experience. So it's not the experience in marketing terms, but in terms of how do tourists experience the world as tourists. And the backdrop of this theory is research is the theory of technological mediation, which tries to understand how technological artifacts connect us to the world and shape our relationship with our environment, because technologies organize the ways in which we perceive and experience things, how we behave. They bring new norms, new etiquettes, and change our relationship to the world and to other humans. And I have included some vignettes from an empirical study on smartphones during travel in this presentation. So you will see those as well. So usually don't make this preamble about the tourist, but I thought since I'm not talking to a tourism audience, I would mention briefly why study the tourist. And I will take McCannell and Bauman's words to show that, or to say that the tourist is a cipher of the modern world. We all have the tourist syndrome. We are all tourists at some point in our life, most of us at least. And tourism is a sort of purified form of what in ordinary life is mixed and obscured. And on top of that, the tourist as a unit of analysis is not a social group. So it's not a sociological analysis. So it can go beyond that, and it helps us do a more philosophical analysis of what it means to be a tourist. And why the smartphone? I use Galit Wellner's distinction between the three variations of the phone. My work is very inspired by her book, A Post-Phenomenological Inquiry of the Cell Phone. And she identifies these three: the talking heads, where the voice was the most important thing, then texting at hand, where the text was the most important thing, and then the third type, the third paradigm, that she calls the kingdom of multimedia applications. That is, phones that have a touch screen and a multitude of multimedia applications. So in tourism, it has been recognized that smartphones are technologies that are created to carry out tasks instead of humans, but they are also technologies that impose behaviors on humans and that bring about changes in the tourist experience, both in terms of activities and emotions. So my question ultimately is, how do smartphones connect the tourist to the world and shape the tourist relation with her environment? So I am very far from coming up with a theory of tourism, smartphone mediation, but in my work, in my fieldwork and in reading, I have found several instances of mediation, or I've called them instances of mediation, some moments that show how the tourist experience is really being mediated and reconfigured through the mediation of technology, and in this case, smartphones. So the first instance comes from its multi-stability. As we all know, technological objects or any object are multi-stable. The smartphone can be so many things. It has all these applications and it can be so many things at once. But what I find interesting is this sort of spillover effect where certain activities, certain things that are typical of everyday life and do not traditionally belong in the tourist experience are carried over into the tourist experience and effectively reconfigure what a tourist experience is, because things like banking, paying rent, searching for jobs, searching for apartment, checking work and emails, organizing events, playing games, talking to people, social media, and so on. They're all activities that now can and are part of a tourist experience. They are things that tourists do in their experience, and this is reconfigured by the multi-stable nature of the phone. And these activities that I listed here are all things that popped up in my research. People actually said that they were doing these things during their trips. And I'm not talking about month-long trip, I'm talking about 5 days to a destination, and they would search for jobs or search for apartments. Another instance of mediation that also comes from the multi-stability of the phone is what Galit Wellner also calls elimination of everyday carry. And I, of course, in this case, call it elimination of tourist carry. So all the things that a tourist would have brought with them before having a smartphone, they now don't need to bring them anymore. A guidebook, a map, a brochure, watch, flashlight, and so on, a camera, and so on. And if they do choose to bring these things, it assumes a different meaning for them. To bring a camera or a guidebook has a different meaning now than it would have when the phone couldn't, or when the tourist didn't have the phone to fulfill these capabilities. Another very important instance is what, again, Galit Wellner calls the wall window, which would be this characteristic of the smartphone that it can build a wall around the person, a wall from the physical environment that they're in, but it can also at the same time open a window to another place, a virtual place. And in tourism, this has been called doubling, but I would maybe call it multiplying, because it's not just two places where you can be at once. And I think the question that I want to ask here is, where is the tourist? And I want to ask specifically where, because I think that the space and place metaphor is particularly relevant in tourism, where space and place are fundamental in the experience. So while Wellner talks about attention and distraction, I want to talk about multiple spaces, the physical, the digital, but also a third space, the phygital, because the physical space and the digital space are not effectively separated, although the attention of the person can be, but both are part of the reality of the tourist and of the tourist experience, therefore. And this has been called, and I have called it, phygital space. I have a little vignette here, the first vignette that I'm showing this girl, Zoe, 27-year-old. She went to Croatia and Montenegro with her boyfriend, and it was their first trip together. So she told me, I didn't use my phone a lot because it was the first vacation with my boyfriend, so I wanted to enjoy the company and not be rude. So she wanted to be there with him. However, my study, through a different method that I'm not going to describe right now, also showed that during the trip she was browsing and posting on social media, communicating via various messaging services, playing games, using Google Maps, online banking, checking work, and looking for apartments. So my question is, where was she? Was she at work? Was she at whatever beach where her friend was just posting on social media and she was looking at that? And of course, this also has an effect on how people are social during their trip. Are they social with the people in the digital space, in the physical space, or, as I think, both? And this effectively, again, it reconfigures what it means to be social, what it means to be together with people during a tourist experience. Another instance that I have identified is what I've called digital retranscriptions. I didn't come up with this term, but I applied it to this, to the tourism example, where I think it's something like Stigler's eventization, where the reduction of the delay, where the delay between an event and its representation are reduced or eliminated altogether. So an event or something that happens is immediately transcribed and retranscribed into a device, and it assumes a different meaning because of that. And not only that, it's also made memorable through that. So the person who records the event is able to remember that. And I have another vignette to show this example, to show this instance. Amira, she is from the United Arab Emirates. She has a husband and 2 kids, and every year she travels to a European capital to attend a concert and enjoy touring the city. So this time she went to Geneva, and she went to a concert and took photos and videos of the concert. And she told me that she found that she really enjoyed looking back into the photos and videos and trying to recall the memories. And it gave her really good feelings, more than attending the conference itself, which she found very strange. And it's not that she wasn't enjoying it. She says it actually helped her keep things in her mind, and then compare this to an event that she attended years prior, where she can hardly remember anything from the concert. And of course, my question here would be, isn't it important to forget things? I mean, a memorable experience is something that is memorable. And if we are able to record it and recall it through our devices, it changes the way we experience it and the way we remember it. So this has huge, huge implications for what it means to have an experience, to enjoy an experience, or not enjoy it, and to remember an experience. Another instance that I found is about optimization and spontaneity. Of course, when one is traveling, it's very important to make the most of their time, but it's also very important to be spontaneous. And again, Galit Wellner talks about a new spontaneity that comes from change in practices that are due to information being available anywhere at any time. And in my previous work with my colleague, we came up with this term, planned serendipity. We didn't coin the term, but applied it to tourism in a different sense. And it's a concept that's supposed to overcome the juxtaposition between planning and spontaneity. And it's supposed to consider that there are degrees of spontaneity, even in structured plans, and vice versa. So, for example, the phone is used to estimate time and to plan routes, and it allows for flexibility, so it allows to plan less in advance and more in the moment, and it allows to adapt to circumstances like the weather, but it also allows to check and double check everything and to rely on the internet for every decision, and what Galit Wellner calls micro and hyper coordination for last minute updates and decisions. So this is, again, a reconfiguration of the experience due to the affordances of the smartphone. Another important concept in tourism is the gaze. The gaze is the set of tourist knowledge and expectations that organize the way they relate to the other when they travel. And through the smartphone, the gaze becomes very much tourist-centric. Through selfies, the gaze becomes self-directed, and selfie taking becomes a way of looking at the tourist destination, at the place, where the selfie is in the foreground and the destination is in the background. I mean, this is me. I thought I would put myself in the presentation and my beautiful dog, since I'm not there to present in person. But you see from this picture, the background is not really a good picture. I went through years of selfies to find a picture where the background could be an actual good picture, and I could not find it, because what matters is me in the foreground and the destination is in the background. Another way that the gaze is reorganized is with what I call framing. So gazing upon things and perceiving experiences as something that can be photographed, posted, shared, reported, narrated, blah, blah, blah. And this puts the tourist in a dual position of both actors and narrators at the same time. Ultimately, reality is augmented, and I don't mean this in the sense of augmented reality where you see on the screen things that are not actually there, but I mean that the reality of what we know and what we see is augmented by through the information that we are able to gather about it. So if we look at a map and we see all the information about a place, the information becomes effectively a part of that space, of what we know of that space. And I did not mention location-based services, which is very important, that make the tourist gaze tourist-centric. So we all have experienced this of being somewhere, looking at our phone, what is around me, what can I do around me? And that makes our existence as a tourist very tourist-centric, very self-centric, where I want to know what is around me. So, another mediation that happens is a mediation of tourist attractions. So attractions consist of a semiotic relationship between a tourist, a site, and a marker, which is a marker is a piece of information that identifies that a certain thing or place or site is indeed a tourist attraction. And as you could see from this very short video here, it takes 20 seconds to Google tourist attractions and come up with many suggestions. And they are not even the tourist attractions that you would find in a guidebook. They're something that an algorithm picked up and identified as a tourist attraction. So my question is, who or what makes a tourist attraction and how is it made? And again, I have a vignette here. Ines from Mexico, she traveled with her boyfriend to Berlin and told me of a time when they couldn't decide whether to visit a fish market or not. So what she told me is there was one day in Berlin that I saw a food market and I told my boyfriend, let's go see it. And he's like, yeah, but it doesn't appear here on Google Maps. Maybe there's not that many things to see. So I asked her, so you saw it? And she said, yeah, we saw it physically. It was next to the train station. And I was like, I want to go. And he's like, yeah, but it's not marked. So maybe we don't need to go. And this was a very self-explanatory example of how an attraction can be made through these markers and how much power they really hold. And the fact that this is all made by an algorithm is frankly a bit disturbing, but also very interesting in terms of mediation. And I think I have reached my time. So I really thank you for your attention, and I welcome any comments that you may have or questions that you may have. Thank you.